Why has India promised to buy more US oil? Why is India looking to diversify its crude supply? Who are its largest suppliers and how much of the crude oil does it import? How is the government balancing the needs of its energy transition and its energy security? What role is America going to play? India committed to procure more oil and natural gas from the US when Prime Minister Narendra Modi met US President Donald Trump in February in Washington and amid tariff threats. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri said India's energy purchases from the US could increase from last year's $15 billion to $25 billion in the near future. A Reuters report showed that US exports about 357,000 barrels per day of crude to India in February compared with exports of about 221,000 barrels per day last year. India is world's third largest oil importer and consumer. For a country which relies on imports for more than 85% of its crude oil requirements, any step to secure hydrocarbon supplies is crucial. The country has promised to enhance oil and gas purchase from the US, which will bolster energy ties and also help to an extent in achieving ambitious doubling of bilateral trade to $500 billion over the next 5 years. At present, the bilateral trade is in India's favor. The trade statistics of India Office of the United States The statistics of the Office of the United States Trade Representative show that goods trade deficit with India was $45.7 billion in 2024, which is 5.4% increase from 2023. Executive Director Energy Transition and Clean Tech Consulting at S&P Global Commodity Insights, Gauri Johar said that procuring more oil and gas from the US will add to the diversity of major long-term sources of supply. The aim is to establish the US as the leading supplier of crude oil and petroleum products to India. It has been decided to ramp up trade in the hydrocarbon sector, including ethane and petroleum products, with an eye on supply diversification and energy security. The two sides agreed to enhance investments, particularly in the oil and gas infrastructure, and facilitate greater cooperation between energy companies. Strengthening cooperation in civil nuclear energy and US support for India to be made a full member of the International Energy Agency was also mentioned. India imported a total of 234.26 to 34 million tons of crude oil in 23-24. Import dependence touched 87.8% against 87.4% in the previous financial year. Domestic production corresponds to less than 13% of the requirement, with domestic crude oil production remaining almost unchanged at 29 million tons last fiscal. In volume terms, the imports were almost similar, but the import bill in 23-24 declined year on year to 133.37 billion on the back of lower international rates. In 22-23, the oil import bill was $157.53 billion dollars. Additionally, India spent $22.93 billion dollars on the import of 48.6 million tons of petroleum products like LPG, fuel, and petcoke. It also exported 62.59 million tons of products for $47.72 billion. India also imports LNG. In 23-24, the country imported 31.8 billion cubic meters of for $13 billion in the previous fiscal. Gas imports were 26 billion cubic meters. India also imports LNG. In 23-24, the country imported 31.8 billion cubic meters for $13 billion. In the previous fiscal, gas imports were 26 billion cubic meters for $17 billion, the Petroleum and Natural Gas Ministry said in a report. Citing the price shock in 22-23 in wake of Russia invasion of Ukraine. India is keen on increasing the share of clean fuel in its energy basket, emphasizing on the strategic importance of energy ties with the US, especially for LNG, petroleum and natural gas. Minister Hardeep Singh Puri said India wants to increase its natural gas consumption to 15% from the existing about 6%. In recent years, the US has emerged as one of the largest suppliers of LNG to India. If war-related sanctions against Russia are lifted, Europe may resume sourcing natural gas from Russia again, making the US intensify efforts to enhance supplies to other existing customers and explore new markets. How much energy is sourced from Russia? While India would like to engage with the US on enhancing energy imports, it is unlikely to stop the country from consolidating and forging energy ties with others. Petroleum Minister said the new US administration's push for increased oil supply has created favorable conditions in global markets. The emergence of new oil sources from the Western Hemisphere, including Brazil, Argentina, Suriname, Canada, and US and Guyana, are poised to be beneficial for major consuming nations like India. Supply commitment from multiple sources may not necessarily insulate against long term price volatility but provide the country different options in the event of geopolitical disturbances. Interestingly, the Trump administration has in recent weeks got down to resettling ties with Russia for the first time since the war on Ukraine began in 2022. This would make things easier for India, as Russia in the last 3 years has emerged as a major crude oil supplier at discounted price amid a cap introduced as part of the sanctions by G7. Citing a report of global think tank Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, PTI reported that India brought crude oil worth 49 billion euros from Russia in the third year of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. India, which has traditionally sourced oil from West Asia, began importing a large volume of oil from Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. This led to India's import of Russian oil seeing a dramatic rise, growing from less than 1% of its total crude oil imports to 40% in a short period. The IEA, in its India's gas market report Outlook to 2030, says the gas country's gas consumption is set to reach 103 billion cubic meter annually by the end of the decade. Emerging from a decade of slow growth and periodic declines, the country's natural gas demand increased by more than 10% in both 23-20 and 24, indicating an inflection point. India's domestic gas production, which met 50% of the demand in 2023, is projected to grow, reaching just under 38 billion cubic meter by 2030. While total gas consumption in 2023 was only marginally higher than 2011 levels, three key factors are converging to drive substantial growth: rapid infrastructure expansion, recovering domestic production, and expected ease on global gas market conditions. India's gas market is entering a new phase of growth supported by significant infrastructure development and clear policy direction. IAA Director of Energy Markets and Security Kinsuke Sadamori said the prospect of higher gas demand in India coincides with an expected wave of new global LNG supply. However, it will require planning and market coordination to ensure supply security and to help gas to compete in the price sensitive market. The government is pursuing a multi-pronged strategy to reduce import dependence and substituting demand for crude oil. It is also pushing a renewable and alternate fuels such as ethanol, compressed biogas, and biodiesel. The IEA, in its India's gas market report Outlook to 2030, says the gas country's gas consumption is set to reach 103 billion cubic meter annually by the end of the decade. Emerging from a decade of slow growth and periodic declines, country's natural gas demand increased by more than 10% in both 2023 and 2024, indicating an inflection point. India's domestic gas production, which met 50% of demand in 2023, is projected to grow, reaching just under 38 billion cubic meter by 2030. Country's gas consumption is set to reach 103 billion cubic meter annually by the end of the decade. Emerging from a decade of slow growth and periodic decline, country's natural gas demand increased by more than 10% in both 23 and 24, which India's domestic gas production, which means 50% of the gas demand in 23 is projected to grow, reaching under 38 billion cubic meters by 2030. While total gas consumption was only marginally higher than the 2011 levels, three key factors are converging to drive substantial growth: rapid infrastructure expansion, recovering domestic production, and an expected ease of growing global gas market conditions. India's gas market is entering a new phase of growth, supported by significant infrastructure and clear policy direction. The prospect of higher gas demand in India coincides with an expected wave of new global LNG supply. However, it will require planning and market coordination to ensure supply of security to help gas compete in a price sensitive market. While India would like to engage with the US on enhancing energy imports, it is unlikely to stop the country from consolidating and forging ties with others. How much energy is sourced from Russia? While India would like to engage with the US on enhancing energy imports, it is unlikely to stop the country from consolidating and forging energy ties with others. The petroleum minister said the US administration's push for increased oil supply has created favorable conditions in the global markets. Emergence of new oil sources from Western Hemisphere, including Brazil, Argentina, Suriname, Canada, and US and Guyana, are poised to be beneficial for major oil consuming nations like India. Supply commitments from major multiple sources may not necessarily insulate against long term price volatility, but provide the country different options in the event of geopolitical disturbances. Interestingly, the Trump administration has in recent weeks got down to resettling ties with Russia for the first time since the war on Ukraine began in 2022. This would make things easier for India. This would this would make things easier for India as Russia in the last 3 years has emerged as a major crude oil supplier at discounted price, says amid a cap introduced as part of the sanctions by G7, citing a report of global think tank Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. PTI reported that India brought crude oil worth 49 billion euros from Russia in the third year of Moscow invasion of Ukraine. India, which has traditionally sourced oil from West Asia, began importing large volume of oil from Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. This led to India's imports of Russian oil seeking dramatic rise. India, which traditionally sourced oil from West Asia, began importing large volume of oil from Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. This has led to India's imports of Russian oil seeing a dramatic rise, growing from less than 1% of its total crude oil imports to 40% in a short period. India bought crude oil worth $49 billion from Russia in the third year of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. India imported a total 243 million tons of crude oil. Import dependence touched 87% against 87.8% against 87.4% in the previous year. Domestic production corresponds to less than 13% of the requirement, with domestic crude oil production remaining unchanged at 29 million tons last fiscal. In volume terms, the imports were almost similar, but the import bill was declined year on year to $133 billion on back of the lower international rates. In 22-23, oil import bills was $157 billion. Additionally, India spent $22 billion on import of 48 million tons of petroleum products like LPG, fuel oil, and petcoke. It has also exported 62 million tons of products for $47 billion. India also imports LNG. In 23-24, country imported 31 billion cubic meters for $13 billion. In the previous fiscal, the gas imports were 26 billion cubic meters for $17 billion, Petroleum and Gas Ministry said. In the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, India is keen on increasing the share of clean energy in its fuel energy basket, emphasizing on the strategic importance of energy ties with the US, especially for LNG, petroleum and natural gas. Minister Hardeep Singh Puri said India wants to increase its natural gas consumption from 15% to existing about 6%. In recent years, the US has emerged as one of the largest suppliers of LNG to India. If war related sanctions against Russia are lifted, Europe may resume sourcing natural gas from Russia again, making US intensify efforts to enhance supplies to other existing customers and explore new markets. The aim, what about LNG requirements and supply? The aim is to establish the US a leading supplier of crude oil and petroleum products and LNG to India. It has been decided to ramp up trade in the hydrocarbon sector with an eye on supply diversification and energy security. The two sides agreed to enhance investments, particularly in the oil and gas infrastructure, and facilitate greater cooperation between energy companies. Strengthening cooperation in civil nuclear energy and US support for India to made a full member of the International Energy Agency. Why are Indian firms racing to build local AI? What are the objectives of AI Kosh? How will the Common Compute Facility providing graphics processing units help startups, researchers, and developers? How many GPUs have been commissioned, and what is the roadmap? Why are translation models important? On March 6, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technologies, India AI Mission launched AI Kosh, a national dataset platform that will gather non-personal data from various ministries and departments in order to develop artificial intelligence models and tools. It also launched the Common Compute Portal to allow startups and academia to access shared pool of GPUs to build and run AI models. The India AI Portal was initially set up as a joint initiative between Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology and India Tech Industry Association NASCOM in 2023. The portal has evolved into a mission led entirely by the Union government, announced last March with an outlay of 10 lakh crore. Correction, 10,000 crore. The mission was approved by the Union Cabinet amid the rapid proliferation and development of generative AI models like the ChatGPT and an increased enthusiasm to develop AI. The key objective of the mission was were making AI in India and making AI work for India. While the mission works on many interventions and resources for private companies and academia to research and build AI, a key one that has emerged in the recent week has been the Common Compute Facility to provide GPUs to startups that may not be able to buy them independently in large volume. GPUs, also known as graphic cards, are a key component in many PCs and phones that allow these devices to render images and graphics. However, AI researchers have long used GPUs to run enormously complex calculations involving massive volumes of data. Generative AI models, which can be created and run and when they have access to such computing resources, have become a major use case of GPUs. This is what has enabled firms like Nvidia to foray far beyond video gaming to become an essential component of AI infrastructure around the world. However, GPUs are expensive. Blackwell, a GPU made by Nvidia is reportedly sold out until this October. As such, the India AI mission has started empaneling data centers in India that have GPUs to provide access to their computing resources to startups and researchers. This access will be handled by the mission, which will decide which entities will get how much computing resource access and for how long. As of now, 14,000 GPUs have been acquired and commissioned for use by the empaneled data centers so far. AI Kosh is the implementation, according to the IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnav. The AI Kosh is the implementation of another pillar of the mission, The India AI datasets platform, one of the main issues with building AI models from scratch or to some extent and even adapting AI models to India is that they are largely trained on Western models. They are heavily biased towards English and developed countries. The fact that many internet users and AI Kosha is the implementation of another pillar of the mission, the India AI datasets platform. One of the main issues with building AI models from scratch, or to some extent even adapting existing models to India, is that they are largely trained on Western models that are heavily biased towards English and developed countries. The fact that many internet users are navigating the web and contributing to discussions online in English, even if it is not their main language in India, as the Hindu has reported, has been a major challenge in putting together such data. The AI course is beginning of an attempt, therefore, to make India-specific data much more widely available. The data sets have so far been uploaded, such as translation models between several pairs of Indian languages, and are an effort to diminish the bias by giving researchers and firms building AI tools in India wider access to local content. Many open source AI models would theoretically allow an Indian firm to build their powerful generative AI tools such as chatbots, but local data policymakers and data developers have argued are critical to ensure that such deployments are actually useful over what foreign firms like OpenAI and Google already offer. The mission has seven pillars overall, while the common compute facility and AI Kosha have been under particular focus due to developments like DeepSeek, the Chinese AI model that was trained at far lower cost than competing models from the US. There are other aspects that policymakers have targeted. One is AI Safety Institute in India, which is yet to be formally launched. Such institutes are being created or accredited around the world to develop guardrails around the unintended consequences of AI deployments and to study the risk of mushrooming use of AI across industry and government. These include everything from making sure that chatbot doesn't give a recipe for a bomb to making sure such institutes are being created or accredited around the world to develop guardrails around unintended consequences of AI deployments and to study the risk of mushrooming use of AI across industry and government. This includes everything from making sure that the chatbot doesn't give away a recipe for a bomb, for example, to making sure that specialized AI tools like those used in biomedical research are reliable and can explain their output. Other pillars include the India AI Innovation Center, which aims to create domain specific foundation models and application development initiative to help develop use cases that can be commercialized or to put productive use. Future skills and initiative to develop AI labs in smaller cities and startup financing. A key effort that dovetails with many of these pillars is the request for proposals put out by Mission to develop an indigenously developed foundation model. Building a foundational model, a main program that a generative AI tools runs on is highly resource intensive and accounts for the bulk of developing AI models. The union government is keen on facilitating this process in a matter of months, Mr. Vaishnav has said, and 67 applications have already been received by the mission, which is evaluating them at the present. On March 6, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology's India AI mission launched AI Kosh, a national dataset platform that will gather non-personal data from various ministries and departments. India AI portal was initially set up as a joint initiative between Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology and India Tech Industry Association and NASCOM in 2023. The mission was approved by Union Cabinet amid the rapid proliferation and development of generative AI models like ChatGPT and increased global enthusiasm to develop AI, making AI in India and making AI work for India. While the mission works on many interventions and resources for private companies and academia to research and build AI, a key one that has emerged in recent weeks has been to common compute facility to provide GPUs to startups that may not be able to buy them independently in large volume. GPUs, also known as graphic cards, are a key component in many PCs and phones that allow these devices to render images and graphics. However, AI researchers have long used GPUs to run enormously complex calculations involving massive volumes of data. Generative AI tools, which can be only be created and trained and run when they have access to such computing resources, have been major use case of GPUs. This is what has enabled firms like Nvidia to foray beyond video gaming to become an essential component of AI infrastructure. However, GPUs are expensive. Blackwell, the GPU made by Nvidia, is reportedly sold out until this October. As such, India AI Mission has started empaneling data centers in India that have GPUs to provide access to their computing resources to startups and researchers. This access will be handled by the mission. AI Coach is the implementation of another pillar of the mission, India AI Datasets Platform. One of the main issues with the building AI models from scratch, or to some extent even adapting AI models, existing models, is that they are largely trained on Western models that are heavily biased towards English and developed countries. The fact that many internet users are navigating the web and contributing to discussions online in English, even if it is not their main language in India, has been a major challenge in putting together such data. AI Coach is beginning of an attempt, therefore, to make India-specific data much more widely available. The data sets that have been so far uploaded, such as translation models between several pairs of Indian languages, are an effort to diminish the bias by giving researchers and firms building AI tools widely accessible. Many open source AI models would theoretically allow Indian firms to build their own powerful generative AI tools such as chatbots, but local data policymakers and developers have argued are critical to ensure that such deployments are actually useful over what foreign firms like OpenAI and Google already offer. Minish mission has 7 pillars overall, while the Common Compute Facility and AI Coach have been particular focus due to developments like DeepSeek. There are other aspects that policymakers have targeted. One is AI Safety Institute in India, which is yet to be formally launched. AI Safety Institutes in India. AI Safety Institutes in India. How is a census of river dolphins carried out? The first ever census of Gangetic dolphins, which began 4 years ago, has found 6,300 of the species. The Environment Ministry on March 3 commemorated the World Wildlife Day, released a report by Wildlife Institute of India. River dolphins grow slowly and are found in some of the more threatened habitats, vulnerable particularly to getting entangled in the nets of the fishermen. Nearly all wild animals that are surveyed from time to time are land animals. Observational techniques and statistical modeling methods have evolved over the years to estimate their numbers using camera traps. Accidental deaths from being entangled in fishing nets are a major threat. Unlike in poaching, where certain animals are actively hunted, dolphins wade into these nets and are unable to free themselves. So one is AI safety nets. Second is AI Coach, India AI Datasets Platform. Third is India Compute, Common Compute Facility, Common Compute Facility, Common Compute Facility, Common Compute Facility. Rebel Without Arms, Abdullah Öcalan. The PKK founder's call to his supporters to lay down weapons and dissolve the organization openly opens the possibility of bringing the 40-year conflict between the Turkey's Kurdish minority militants and the state to an end. Mahir Khan, a Stalinist and an admirer of the Cuban Revolution, was the head of the People's Liberation Party Front of the Turkey in the early 1970s. In March 1972, Khan and 10 of his comrades abducted 3 NATO technicians from a radar station in Turkey's Punye. Their demand was to prevent the execution of Denis Yemeniz, a fellow guerrilla who was called the Che Guevara of Turkey. The group was hiding in a safe house in Kızıldere on March 30, 1972. They were attacked by Turkey's security personnel and everyone except one was killed. Among those who hit the street to protest the killing of the Marxist leader was Abdullah Öcalan, a 24-year-old graduate from Ankara University. He was arrested and charged with distributing left-wing political magazine. For Mr. Öcalan, incarceration only inflamed his radicalism. Out of jail, he became active in left-wing groups and then founded the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which became initially blended Kurdish identity politics with Marxism-Leninism and launched an armed militancy. More than 40,000 people have been killed in 40 years of the Turkish civil war between the state and Kurdish militants. Several attempts to bring peace in the past remained unsuccessful. On February 27, 2025, Mr. Öcalan, who has been imprisoned since 1999, made a public announcement asking PKK to lay down arms and dissolve itself. The PKK has reached the end of its lifespan, making its dissolution necessary. Mr. Öcalan wrote in a letter from the prison his call, which has welcomed by the Turkish government. Mr. Öcalan, who has been imprisoned since 1999, made a public announcement asking the PKK to lay down arms and dissolve itself. Mr. Öcalan wrote in a letter from the prison his call, which has welcomed by the Turkish government, has rekindled hope that decades-long civil war will be brought to an end. While growing up, Abdullah Öcalan's hero was Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the founder of modern Turkey. He wanted to get enrolled into a military high school but was rejected. While in college, he joined Revolutionary Youth Federation of the Turkey. Later, two convictions led him to found the PKK. One, he was convinced that Kurdistan is a colony. Two, he concluded that the Kurdistan issue was not a priority for the mainstream left-wing parties. Mr. Öcalan and his comrade Kemal Pir started mobilizing Kurdish radical youth on the assertion that the liberation of the Turkish people depends upon the liberation of the Kurdish people. In 1978, at the conference in the village of Faiz in Diyarbakir, Mr. Öcalan announced of the formation of Parti Karkaran Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, for the liberation of the Kurdish regions of Turkey. Kurds, who make up 15 to 20% of the Turkey's population, a persecuted ethnic minority. They argued the PKK built inroads among the Kurds living across Syria-Turkey border. In 1979, Mr. Öcalan moved to Syria's Kobane, from where he would continue to lead the PKK. In 1980, the Turkish military seized power through a coup. The subsequent years saw mass arrest, torture of those who dissented. The crackdown on Kurdish political groups intensified. On August 15, 1984, amid growing state violence, the PKK launched its first armed offenses against two military posts. It was my idea alone, Mr. Öcalan later said. His decision to launch the guerrilla war, the state responded with massive force. Kurdish saw Öcalan as a charismatic leader who fought for their cause, but for Turkey, he has been a terrorist. In mainstream Turkish media, he was labeled a baby killer. We are not in favor of violence to solve the problems, Mr. Öcalan said in an interview in 1988, but it was required to prevent our national identity from being destroyed entirely. The second phase of the Mr. Öcalan's militant activism began after he was expelled from Syria in 1998. Mr. Öcalan moved to Europe, but European countries, under pressure from Turkey and its allies, refused to give him asylum. In February 1999, he was abducted by Turkish National Intelligence Organization with help from CIA and Mossad in Nairobi, Kenya, and was jailed on Imra Island in Turkey. After a short trial, Mr. Öcalan was sentenced to death. 2002, when Turkey abolished the death penalty, Mr. Öcalan's death sentence was commuted to aggravated life imprisonment, incarceration until death without parole. For years, he was the lone prisoner in Imra, but it was during this period of solitary confinement that Mr. Öcalan transitioned from Marxist Leninism into Democratic Confederation, which he described as a borderless community-based democracy that promotes ecological living and radical gender equality. He was inspired by the writings of American political theorist Murray Bookchin, a strong advocate of social decentralization. Nation states have become serious obstacles for any social development. Democratic confederalism is the contrasting paradigm of the oppressed people, Mr. Oakland said, explaining his theory. Democratic confederalism is a national, non state social paradigm in essence. Mr. Oakland gave up his demand for an independent Kurdistan and asked for greater autonomy for the Kurdish regions, which can sustain themselves through local councils while being part of a different national states. In 1993, Mr. Oakland had declared a unilateral ceasefire demanding a political and peaceful solution, but it did not lead to any breakthrough. After he was abducted and jailed, the insurgency intensified. Between 2013 and 2015, there were multiple rounds of talks between the PKK and the Turkish state, now ruled by Recep Tayyip Erdogan's Justice and Development Party. But the peace process collapsed in April 2015, triggering a new wave of violence. This period also saw the Kurds in Syria acquiring greater autonomy during the country's civil war. Alarmed by the political empowerment of Syrian Kurds, in 1993 Oakland declared unilateral ceasefire demanding political and peaceful solution, but it did not lead to any breakthrough. After he was abducted and jailed, the insurgency intensified. Between 2013 and 15, there was multiple rounds of talks between PKK and Turkish state, now ruled by Recep Tayyip Erdogan's Justice and Development Party. But peace process collapsed in 15, triggering a new wave of violence. This period also saw Kurds in Syria acquiring greater autonomy during the country's civil war. Alarmed by the political empowerment of Syrian Kurds, Turkey carried out multiple military incursions into Syria's border, but at home, the PKK continued its armed attacks. The ice broke in October when an ally of President Erdogan made a surprise call to Mr. Oakland to end the insurgency in return for peace and his freedom. After this, the restrictions on Mr. Oakland were eased, and his relatives and political allies were allowed to visit him. A successful solution to the Kurdish question could strengthen the political hands of Mr. Erdogan, whose second term as president under the new constitution would come to an end in 2028. If Mr. Erdogan wants to extend his power, he needs to amend the constitution, and to amend the constitution he would need new political allies. Peace with Kurds will also make Turkey's domestic security and improve his regional standing. For Mr. Oakland, now 76, the reapproachment provides the opportunity to shut down the civil war, gain freedom, and open a new chapter of Kurdish-Turkish relations. There is no alternative to democracy in pursuit of realization of a political system. Mr. Oakland wrote, there is no alternative to democracy in pursuit and realization of a political system, Mr. Oakland wrote in his letter from jail. From a former separatist guerrilla to a democratic confederalist who spent 26 years in prison, Mr. Oakland has come a long way. Those who take the sword must know when to put it back into the sheath. The theorist and commander of the Kurdish military believes this is the time. In 1978, at the conference in village of Fez, India, Barkar Abdullah Ol Khan announced the formulation of PKK, which was the liberation of the Kurdish regions of Turkey. On August 15, 1984, amidst growing state violence, PKK launched its first armed offensive against two military posts, beginning the civil war. In February 1999, he was abducted by the Turkish National Intelligence Organization with the help of CIA and Mossad in Nairobi, Kenya, and was jailed in Imra Island in Turkey. The Mumbai attack accused the filed has filed a fresh petition before U.S. Supreme Court Justice Robert C. Roberts seeking a stay on his extradition to India. According to U.S. investigation, Tahir Hussain Rana's link to 2611 go back to the August 2005 when he and his old schoolmate The Hassan Abdud College, Pakistan's Punjab province, David Coleman Headley first discussed the plot. Headley had been chosen and trained by the LET chief Hafiz Saeed to conduct the reconnaissance surveys in Mumbai and in other Indian cities for targets that would maximize the death of civilians. Rana, a businessman with a Canadian passport who ran a travel and immigration consultancy and butchery in Chicago, was well placed to provide Headley with support, a place to stay, and the ability to provide false travel documents for tickets and visas. As children at the Hassan Kabdal Cadet College, Rana and Headley had become close friends, the US prosecutors, and although they separated in their teens, when Headley's American mother took him out of school and returned to the US, they stayed in touch. Rana joined the Pakistani army, serving for several years before he repeatedly developed a medical condition and left under the cloud for Canada in 1997. In Chicago, a few years later, Rana reunited with his former schoolmate and two met regularly. Headley proposed using Rana's immigration business as a front for Lashkar's surveillance activities, with Headley posting as an immigration consultant for Rana in Mumbai. To sweeten the deal for Rana, Headley offered to help resolve Rana's status as a deserter from the Pakistan's army and said the facts recorded by US District Council of Appeals in California while ordering his extradition to India. While Rana has consistently denied being anything but a pawn in Headley's plans, some investigators have questioned whether Rana was in fact Headley's handler and had been sent to Canada early to serve ISI's objectives. Indian prosecutors who secured his conviction in absentia in 2011 argued that Rana's involvement was intense, from helping Headley secure a 5-year multiple entry visa to India to organizing his tickets and stay in Mumbai and other cities to liaising with Pakistani known as Mazhur Iqbal for instructions. In November 2008, just days before the attacks, Rana himself traveled to Mumbai with his wife, although he claimed he was there for business only. A month later, fresh from the success in plotting and planning, which was carried out by 10 Pakistani terrorists, Rana reportedly listened as Headley described their next target. Headley had next been assigned by the LET to conduct a surveillance operation by the Jylland Posten newspaper in Denmark. The plan was to build a blueprint for terrorism on a suicide mission to attack the newspaper that had published cartoons depicting Prophet Muhammad. The plea bargain filed after Headley was arrested in Chicago in 2009 for the Mickey Mouse conspiracy named after the cartoons in Denmark, which exempted Headley from the death penalty or from being extradited, was setback for Indian officials. But more than that, it was a blow for Tahawwur Rana's hopes that he could escape justice after his role in his attacks by pleading that he was innocent bystander on Headley's work. Although the US courts acquitted Rana of charges on Mumbai 2611 attacks, they convicted him for involvement in the Jolens Poston case and his links with LET, sentencing him 14 years imprisonment before he was released early in 2020. As Rana worked his way through the levels of appeal, he had much time to think about the twist of fate that means that it is he and not his friend and co-conspirator who then testified against him who will have to answer for the Mumbai attacks and face justice for both their actions. Anti-government agency Elon Musk dominated department targets the wing of government and administer social protection of millions of Americans. Smaller government and spending cuts have been the core Republican objectives since the advent of the Reagan economics in 1980s. So when Donald Trump announced in September 24 that government would create Government Efficiency Commission to eliminate wasteful expenditure, people were not surprised. He also made it known that the idea came from Elon Musk, who has contributed $290 million at his presidential campaign. However, as the past month has revealed, what Mr. Musk had in mind was not merely the usual stuff, spending cuts. His aim was far more radical, to drastically shrink the government bureaucracy and thereby create the space to install regime of AI first governance. With the AI tools under the control of the tiny Silicon Valley elite of which he is leading member, the AI researcher Eric Salvaggio has described Doge as an AI coup. Signing Doge into existence was one of the Mr. Trump's first moves. Post inauguration, his executive order dated January 20 stated that its purpose was to implement President Doge's agenda by moderating federal technology and software to maximize governmental efficiency and productivity. It makes no mention of reducing staff or spending cuts. Instead, it devotes the entire section to elaborating what the modernizing technology and software would entail. Doge was created as an entity that took over the US Digital Service. The US Digital Service was housed in the Office of Management and Budget, which it was subject to open record. But Mr. Trump created the US Doge Service Temporary Organization and moved it to the Executive Office of the President and thereby potentially exempting it from the Federal Freedom of Information Act. So, Mr. Musk, who does not have a clearly defined role in Doge, Amy Gleason, a former health tech executive, is officially the acting administrator of Doge, is answerable to no one but Mr. Trump. In short span of time it has been in existence, Doge has unleashed panic and chaos in the ranks of country's 2.3 million strong federal bureaucracy. Mr. Musk adopted the same wrecking ball tactics he used to eviscerate Twitter, where he laid off 80% of the staff soon after he took over. At Doge, he spent out buyout offers accepted by 77,000 federal staffers so far. He has sent termination notices to more than 25,000 workers. He has dismantled entire agencies such as US Agency for International Development and Customer Financial Protection Bureau, which protects Americans from loan sharks. He has cancelled leases and contracts worth millions of dollars. Given the lack of transparency, the only window into Doge's operations is its website. Mr. Musk has claimed that Doge's goal was to shave off $2 trillion from the 6.75 trillion US dollar budget. The Doge website runs live updates on savings accrued. It claims to have saved $105 billion as of March 8. Not only is a far cry from $2 trillion goal, a New Yorker calculation estimates that even if Mr. Musk fired all the 2.3 million federal employees, the total savings would be $245 billion. Pursuit of mega savings through staff cuts is a quixotic venture because government spending is on programs and benefits, not salaries. All these lends credence to the view that saving money by cutting the bureaucracy is only the means. The end is to embed AI at the heart of the decision making in the federal executive. As Salvaggio puts it, the Trump administration fames generative AI as a remedy to government waste. However, what it seeks to automate is not paperwork but democratic decision making. In all of this, the hatred against deep state whipped up the MAGA propaganda machinery will only ensure that Doge retains popular support even as it decimates the very wings of the government that administers their social protection. So that's all in this one. See you in the next.